This is not a message about escaping pain. This is a confrontation with a monumental truth. The quest for a life without suffering is a fool's errand, a fragile delusion that leaves you perpetually vulnerable. In a world designed to test the limits of your endurance, fragility is a choice. Unbreakability is a discipline. For centuries, philosophers and priests have promised transcendence, a way to rise above the earthly struggle. But one thinker, the formidable German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, offered a more difficult yet infinitely more potent path. Nietzsche did not seek to abolish suffering. He sought to master it. He recognized that the very forces that threaten to shatter us, adversity, loss, betrayal, and chronic pain are, in fact, the indispensable crucibles in which true, formidable strength is forged. Nietzsche's life, etched in chronic illness and intellectual isolation, was his laboratory. He discovered that resilience is not a passive quality. It is an active, ongoing project of self-creation, built upon a foundation of fundamental internalized beliefs. These beliefs are the mental architecture of the Übermensch, the self-mastered individual who creates his own values and transcends victimhood. They are the secrets to transforming the universal currency of pain into a personal reserve of power. Today, we delve into the heart of this radical wisdom. We are going to explore the three foundational beliefs that, once adopted, will fundamentally reorient your relationship with every hardship you face, turning inevitable tragedy into personal triumph. It's time to shed the shackles of the passive self and begin the demanding, liberating work of self-overcoming. It's time to stop merely surviving and start commanding your existence. The first and perhaps most terrifying of these beliefs is the ultimate spiritual affirmation, the Embrace of Amor Fati. Belief 1. The Embrace of Amor Fati. The first pillar of the unbreakable spirit is the most formidable, a declaration of total spiritual sovereignty over the chaos of existence. It is the concept Nietzsche referred to as Amor Fati, the love of fate. This is not a passive acceptance. It is not stoic resignation. It is not saying, "This hardship is happening, so I guess I must endure it." That is the counsel of the weak, the philosophy of the herd. Amor Fati is a furious, willful, and absolute affirmation of everything that has been, everything that is, and everything that will ever be. It is the uncompromising demand you place upon yourself to not merely bear necessity, but to love it. To understand the radical nature of Amor Fati, we must first confront the deep, insidious power of negation. Most people live their lives in a state of perpetual no. No to the past, "I wish I hadn't made that mistake." No to the present, "I wish this pain would stop." "I wish my circumstances were different." No to the future, "I hope I never have to face that again." This constant internal rebellion against reality is the primary source of suffering. Not the external event itself, but the internal no that follows it. You are constantly at war with the given, and in that war, you are perpetually defeated, because the given, the fact, cannot be changed. Nietzsche identifies this negation as the fundamental expression of a failed will to power, a spirit that lacks the courage to affirm its own existence. When you say, "I wish this had not happened," you are fundamentally wishing that you were a different person, with a different trajectory, living a different life. You are rejecting the unique concatenation of events, the triumphs and the failures, the joys and the tragedies, that have converged to create the singular consciousness you inhabit today. Amor Fati demands the opposite. It is the ultimate act of self-mastery and self-acceptance. It compels you to look back at the broken relationships, the profound humiliations, the agonizing losses, the physical betrayals, and the moments of crushing defeat. And instead of regretting them, you must state, "Yes, and I would have it again." Imagine the totality of your life, every small decision, every accident, every conversation, every heartache. Now imagine you could change one piece of it. If you removed that piece of suffering, that specific trial, you would fundamentally alter the chain of causation that led to your current moment. You would be deleting the scar tissue that holds you together, eliminating the hard-won wisdom that informs your judgment, and erasing the precise psychological tension that drives your greatest ambitions. Amor Fati recognizes that your strength is not found in spite of your history, but precisely because of it. This profound affirmation is inextricably linked to one of Nietzsche's most powerful and terrifying thought experiments, the eternal recurrence. He asks, What if a demon were to steal upon you in your loneliest solitude and tell you that you must live this life, this very moment and every single moment of your life, over and over again for all eternity, no change? Every pain, every joy, every thought, every sigh, the exact same sequence eternally repeated. How would you respond? Would you fall to the ground and gnash your teeth and curse the demon, seeing the return of your life as a crushing burden? Or would you respond with absolute ecstatic joy and proclaim, "You are a god, and I have never heard anything more divine"? The thought of the eternal recurrence is not meant to be a literal cosmological prediction. It is an ethical and psychological test. It is the ultimate measure of the strength of your spirit. If you cannot affirm your life, including its darkest elements, and yearn for its repetition, then you have failed the test of existence. You are living a life you unconsciously deem unworthy of eternity. The man who truly loves his fate, the individual who lives by Amor Fati, is the one who can face the thought of eternal repetition and embrace it without reservation. Why? Because the individual who truly affirms their life understands that the suffering was not an obstacle to their greatness, but the very material from which their greatness was constructed. They realize that they cannot have the strength they possess today without the wound they endured yesterday. The wound is the source of the unique power. This belief forces a radical revaluation of all negative experiences. We must stop seeing setbacks as interruptions and start seeing them as necessary ingredients. Consider the athlete who requires the tearing and regeneration of muscle fibers to grow stronger. Consider the metal that must be subjected to intense heat and hammering to become a fine blade. Consider the star that must collapse under its own gravity to become a supernova. In every instance, the destruction, the stress, the suffering of the material is what precipitates the creation of the higher form. To seek strength while simultaneously rejecting the struggle that creates it is a profound metaphysical contradiction. Amor Fati resolves this contradiction. It provides the psychological mechanism to transform the burden of necessity into the thrill of creation. It is the conscious decision to accept full, uncompromising authorship over your life story. When you encounter a hardship, the typical response is to lament the situation. The response of the unbreakable spirit, however, is to instantly integrate the hardship into the narrative of self-overcoming. This shift in perspective yields incredible, immediate power. It annihilates resentment. Resentment is the emotional poison of the weak will. It is the impotent rage against what is. By saying yes to your fate, you instantly dissolve the grounds for resentment against others, against circumstances, and most powerfully, against yourself. You liberate your energy from the debilitating cycle of blame and regret and redirect it towards creation. It grants complete psychological freedom. The man who fears nothing that can happen to him has already defeated fate. If you are prepared to love the worst possible outcome, if you can genuinely welcome it as a necessary chapter in your singular, eternal story, then you are entirely free from the anxiety of external control. The world can take your possessions, your health, your reputation, but it cannot take your fundamental affirmation of your own existence. It elevates the present moment. If every past moment is affirmed and every future moment is anticipated as part of the total destiny you love, then the present moment, no matter how painful, is instantly infused with cosmic significance. You are not a victim suffering randomly. You are a creator forging your ultimate self in this very instant. The final and most crucial element of Amor Fati is that it is not a passive acceptance of things as they are, but an active will to create things as they ought to be, knowing that the suffering you encounter in the act of creation is a necessary price and therefore good. You love your fate not because it is comfortable, but because it is the only possible path to the higher being you are destined to become. The pain you are experiencing right now is not a sign that you are failing. It is the absolute proof that you are succeeding in the difficult, dangerous, and magnificent task of evolving. To truly embrace Amor Fati is to become a Dionysian figure, one who embraces the chaotic, terrible, and beautiful totality of life with a joyous, unreserved affirmation. It is to look at the storm gathering on the horizon and not cower, but feel the electric charge of destiny, saying with absolute conviction, "Let it come. Whatever is necessary to forge the soul that I am to become, I welcome it all." This is the defiant, unyielding, and ultimate declaration of the unbreakable spirit. Do not merely endure your life. Will it? Belief 2, the will to power, self-overcoming. If the love of fate, Amor Fati is the spirit's total affirmation of the past. Then the will to power is the spirit's dominant, furious projection into the future. It is the second and arguably the most misunderstood pillar of Nietzsche's philosophy. And it is the only psychological mechanism capable of turning suffering into a source of unending strength. The common, timid interpretation of the will to power is a pathetic reduction. It is often miscast as mere political domination, as the desire to crush others, or as a crude biological urge for survival. This is the language of those who have never grasped the sheer magnitude of Nietzsche's vision. To Nietzsche, the will to power is the fundamental, primordial, creative force inherent in all life, from the lowliest cell to the highest human consciousness. It is not the will to survive. It is the will to overcome. Think for a moment about the concept of mere survival. What does it demand? It demands minimum effort, safety, stasis, and the avoidance of risk. A life dedicated solely to survival is a life dedicated to inertia. It is the ultimate expression of fear. Yet you know instinctively that life does not behave this way. Life is characterized by excess, by expansion, by risk, and by a relentless striving for greater complexity and mastery. The redwood sapling does not merely seek to survive. It seeks to pierce the sky, defying gravity and absorbing every resource to dominate its environment. The lion does not merely survive. It asserts a territory and a mastery over its domain. And the philosopher, or the great artist, or the brilliant engineer does not merely survive. He seeks to impose his unique values, his unique structure, and his unique interpretation upon the raw, indifferent chaos of the world. This fundamental, expansive drive is the will to power. It is the drive toward growth, toward becoming more, toward mastery over resistance. And here is the crucial connection. Suffering is the highest expression of resistance. If the will to power is the engine of expansion, it requires something solid, something immense to push against. A steam engine is useless without pressure. A hammer cannot prove its worth without an anvil. Without genuine resistance, the will to power collapses into boredom, weakness, and the soft decay of comfort. This is why, in Nietzsche's philosophy, the ultimate object of your will to power is not your enemies, not your circumstances, but yourself. The will to power manifests as self-overcoming. The man who strives for greatness must continuously declare war on his former self. The man you were yesterday with his soft habits, his limited expectations, his comforting lies, and his tendency toward surrender must be recognized as the ultimate obstacle to the man you must become tomorrow. This destruction is painful. This process of self-overcoming is the deepest kind of suffering there is, because it is the suffering of self-inflicted destruction and creation. It is the agony of tearing down your own identity, your most cherished comforts, and your deepest psychological defenses in order to build something higher, something more formidable, something more capable of affirming life. When you force yourself to adhere to a discipline that breaks the comfort of your routine, that is self-overcoming. When you stare down a fear that has governed your life for decades and choose to act in spite of it, that is self-overcoming. When you accept responsibility for a failure instead of projecting blame, thereby seizing the power to change, that is self-overcoming. Each act of self-overcoming generates two things: pain, the resistance of the old self being destroyed, and power, the creative force of the new self being forged. The unbreakable individual understands that the pain of the resistance is not a deterrent. It is a confirmation that the will to power is functioning at its highest capacity. You must not avoid the suffering inherent in growth. You must actively seek it out because it is the only proof that you are on the path of ascent. Nietzsche's great disdain for the herd morality, the morality of pity, equality and comfort, stems from his belief that it actively discourages this self-overcoming. It seeks to remove the resistance, to smooth out the painful path, to medicate the anxiety of the unknown. But in removing the resistance, it removes the very possibility of true power and individual greatness. It produces citizens who are safe, comfortable, and utterly fragile, souls who are easily broken when genuine hardship finally arrives. The truly unbreakable person, the one who operates under the impulse of the will to power, sees external suffering, a betrayal, a catastrophic loss, a debilitating illness not as a random punishment, but as the universe presenting a magnificent, difficult new material to work with. When disaster strikes, the will to power asks not, "Why me?" the language of victimhood, but rather, "What can I create out of this circumstance?" It is the recognition that the strongest self is the creative self. The creative self is the one who refuses to be passively defined by external forces. If fate delivers you tragedy, Amor Fati, the will to power is the demand that you use that tragedy as the stone upon which you carve your own meaning and your own destiny. You do not just survive the punch. You use the energy of the punch to pivot and strike back with a new direction for your life. This is the meaning of the Übermensch, the overman or superman. The Übermensch is not a biologically superior being. He is the man who has fully overcome himself. He has mastered his own chaos, harnessed his own suffering, and stands as a creator of his own values in a universe that has otherwise declared all values to be dead. He is the artist of his own existence, and his primary material is the very suffering he has endured. To integrate this belief and become unbreakable, you must commit to three things. Embrace the tension of the two worlds. You must maintain a constant, painful awareness of the gap between the person you are and the person you must become. This tension, this dissatisfaction with your current limitations, is the very pressure that drives the will to power. Never be content with your current level of mastery. Affirm the asceticism of greatness. Recognize that all lasting power requires an initial period of intense self-imposed suffering. The discipline, the denial of comfort, the long hours spent in the dark. These are the sacrifices that transform your will into a sharp, formidable tool. You must actively seek the difficult path because it is the only one that pays dividends of power. Use pain as a diagnostic tool. When you feel emotional or psychological pain, do not retreat. Instead, treat it as a clear signal from your will to power. Pain tells you exactly where the resistance is strongest, where the old soft self is fighting hardest to survive. It pinpoints the precise area where your greatest potential for overcoming lies. Thank the pain, because it shows you the work. The will to power is the perpetual motion of creation, and creation is inherently violent, messy, and agonizing. But to shirk that pain is to choose stagnation. To embrace it is to guarantee your ascent. To be unbreakable is to be the storm, not the leaf. It is to know that whatever wound you receive, your will, the fundamental drive to expand and conquer resistance, will use that very wound as a source of energy for your next, higher stage of being. You are not a creature of preservation. You are a destructive, creative, expanding force. This is the defiant roar of the indomitable soul. I will not merely survive this. I will become stronger because of it. I will overcome. The first two pillars, Amor Fati and the will to power, establish the unbreakable spirit's relationship to time, affirm the past, and action, master the future. The final pillar deals with the most potent force a human being possesses, the power of interpretation. Belief 3. The primacy of perspective, the revaluation of all values. If Amor Fati is the unconditional yes to necessity, and the will to power is the engine of self-overcoming, then the third and most practical belief that makes you unbreakable is the primacy of perspective, which manifests as the revaluation of all values. This is the mechanism by which the unbreakable individual literally recodes suffering at the deepest level of their psychological operating system. Nietzsche was a perspectivist. This means he believed there are no eternal, objective capital T truths about morality, suffering, or meaning floating in some metaphysical heaven. There are only interpretations. What we call reality is nothing more than the interplay of countless, competing perspectives, psychological drives, biological needs, and historical contingencies, all struggling to assert their view as the dominant one. The moment you grasp this, you seize the ultimate form of power. If there is no objective meaning to suffering, then the meaning it possesses is entirely a product of the perspective you choose to impose upon it. The fragile, broken individual adopts the common, inherited perspective, the slave morality as Nietzsche termed it. This perspective views pain, hardship, risk, and nonconformity as bad, evil, or unjust. It is a morality born out of resentment, ressentiment, a psychological poison where the weak, unable to express their power through action, redefine the attributes of the strong, health, pride, power as inherently immoral. Their suffering is not their fault. It is the fault of the world or the evil outside force. This perspective is a surrender of authorship, guaranteeing that they will forever be broken by every external event. The unbreakable individual, the one driven by the will to power, rejects this. They engage in the radical life-affirming project of the revaluation of all values, Umwertung aller Werte. This is not a suggestion. It is a mandate for psychological survival in a meaningless universe. When tragedy strikes, the fragile person defaults to the existing, inherited life-denying values. This is an injustice. This is a stop sign. This is a sign of my bad luck. The unbreakable spirit looks at the same event and actively, deliberately revalues it. They ask, if my will to power is an engine for growth, how must I interpret this pain so that it becomes fuel? Consider the great suffering of the past two beliefs, the loss affirmed by Amor Fati and the self-destruction demanded by the will to power. Neither affirmation nor action is possible if you maintain the common perspective that pain is an unmitigated evil. You must change the value of the experience itself. You must install a new set of values, a master morality, which judges things based not on external rules, but on the question, does this enhance or diminish my life force, my will to power? From this perspective, suffering is no longer bad. It is a necessary test. It is the weight that proves the structural integrity of your spirit. Without the test, your strength is mere untested faith, a teacher of profundity. Only great pain is the ultimate liberator of the spirit, Nietzsche claimed. It forces a depth of introspection, a ruthless self-examination that comfort can never allow. The wisdom of the tragic figure is superior to the shallow optimism of the comfortable one. A mark of rank. The type of suffering you embrace and conquer becomes a badge of honor. To overcome a great obstacle implies a great strength. The easy life creates the common man. The difficult, self-imposed life creates the higher type, the man of exceptional rank. The process of revaluation is the conscious, continuous work of destroying the nihilistic interpretation of your own pain. Nihilism, for Nietzsche, is not merely believing in nothing. It is believing that the things you currently value, comfort, safety, equality, are in reality worthless, leading to paralysis and despair. By revaluing suffering as necessary for greatness, you destroy the very foundation of nihilism. You re-inject meaning, not through an external God or metaphysical promise, but through the autonomy of your own perspective. This ability to reframe, to look at an experience through a new lens that empowers rather than diminishes you, is the ultimate secret to being unbreakable. It is the ability to maintain inner sovereignty regardless of external reality. The world may hand you a broken shard of glass, but the unbreakable individual revalues it as a prism through which to refract light, or as a tool with which to carve out a new path. To truly master the primacy of perspective, you must practice these disciplines. Assume the interpretive burden. Stop waiting for a priest, a therapist, or society to tell you what your suffering means. Take on the awesome, terrifying burden of being the sole meaning maker in your own life. When something happens, your first question must be, what is the most empowering way I can choose to interpret this event to fuel my own development? Routinely critique your own values. You must become an archaeologist of your own psyche, digging up the origins of your moral assumptions. Why do you believe that comfort is good and struggle is bad? Why do you believe failure is final and not merely a data point? If these values were inherited from a timid source, they must be challenged and overthrown. This is not about being immoral. It is about being beyond conventional life-denying morality. Harness the power of aesthetic perspective. Nietzsche believed life should be treated as a work of art. The suffering in your life, the conflicts, the antagonists, the dark nights, are necessary dramatic elements. The artist does not regret the shadows in his painting. They give depth and contrast to the light. By viewing your suffering aesthetically, as a necessary part of a beautiful, terrifying, and unique story you are creating, you instantly elevate yourself above the mundane complaint of the common man. You are no longer merely enduring a tragedy. You are the tragic hero commanding the stage. This third belief brings the entire framework into sharp focus. Amor Fati gives you the justification for suffering. It must be loved. The will to power gives you the drive for suffering. It must be overcome. And the primacy of perspective gives you the tool to make it possible. You are the sole arbiter of its meaning. The man who is unbreakable has executed the revaluation of all values within his own soul. He is free not because he lacks chains, but because he has chosen to see his chains not as restraints, but as the raw material for a more powerful, finely wrought weapon. His strength is not a gift from the gods. It is an artifact of his own creative, masterful interpretation. He has taken the nihilistic void, the realization that there is no inherent meaning, and affirmed it by becoming the source of his own meaning. In the end, what truly makes you unbreakable is the recognition of this terrifying freedom. You are not what happens to you. You are what you choose to become through what happens to you. Outro. We stand now at the summit of Nietzsche's wisdom, having confronted the three beliefs that transform fragility into an impregnable fortress of spirit. We began with belief 1, the embrace of Amor Fati, the total affirmation of necessity, the spiritual demand to look upon every joy and every agonizing failure, and to say, yes, I would have it again, eternally. This belief annihilates resentment and frees your energy from the futile war against the past. It transforms fate from a burden into a beloved co-creator of your existence. We ascended to belief 2, the will to power, self-overcoming, the fundamental expansive drive toward mastery over resistance. We saw that suffering is not a random setback, but the highest form of resistance, the indispensable friction required to forge a higher self. The unbreakable individual actively seeks the difficult path, understanding that the pain of self-destruction is the absolute proof of creative power and ascent. And finally, we established belief 3, the primacy of perspective, the revaluation of all values, the sovereignty of interpretation. By recognizing that all values are created, not discovered, you seize the power to recode your suffering, transforming it from a nihilistic curse into a necessary condition for your own greatness. You become the artist of your own existence, revaluing every darkness as a crucial element in your masterwork. These are not easy beliefs. They demand courage, a willingness to be lonely, and a brutal honesty that most people avoid their entire lives. They require you to look away from the comforting illusions of victimhood and the soft promises of the herd. To adopt these beliefs is to accept that your greatest responsibility is not to be happy, but to become more, to evolve, to master, and to create. The path to being unbreakable is not paved with comfort. It is paved with challenges you consciously embrace and creatively overcome. The choice is stark. You can be a creature of preservation, seeking only to minimize pain and remaining perpetually fragile. Or you can be a creature of conquest, using every wound, every betrayal, and every obstacle as the necessary material for your next, higher iteration. Now, you possess the map. The demon of the eternal recurrence stands before you, asking if you affirm this life. Your answer is your destiny. Go forth, command your suffering, and let the storm you face become the sound of your own becoming. Be not merely strong, be unbreakable.